The morning sun barely penetrated the thick grey clouds hanging over Forward Operating Base Sentinel in eastern Afghanistan. I stood at the edge of our compound, watching dust devils dance across the barren landscape beyond the wire. My name is Staff Sergeant Marcus Reeves, and I'd been leading my squad through these unforgiving mountains for 7 months. 7 months of patrols, firefights, and sleepless nights that aged you faster than any calendar could measure. The base itself was a collection of fortified structures, sandbag walls and watchtowers, positioned in a valley surrounded by jagged peaks. Every morning brought the same routine: equipment checks, intelligence briefings, and the weight of responsibility that came with keeping my men alive. Today felt different though. The air carried a tension I couldn't quite name, like the silence before a storm that you feel in your bones rather than see in the sky. "Sergeant Reeves, Commander wants you in the briefing tent," called out Private First Class Danny Torres, jogging toward me with that eager expression he still maintained, despite everything we'd been through. Danny was 22, fresh-faced compared to the rest of us, but he'd proven himself reliable when it counted. I followed him across the compound, nodding to the men I passed. My squad consisted of 8 soldiers, each one a brother forged in the crucible of combat. There was Corporal James Mitchell, my second in command, a former college football player from Ohio with the build to prove it. Specialist Ryan Cooper handled communications, always quick with a joke to lighten the mood. Private Jake Sullivan was our youngest, barely 20, but he had eyes like a hawk and could spot danger before it materialized. Inside the tent, Commander Peterson stood over a table covered with maps and satellite imagery. He was a lean man in his 40s, with grey threading through his close-cropped hair and lines around his eyes that spoke of too many difficult decisions. "Reeves, we've got a situation," he said without preamble. "Intel indicates insurgent activity in Grid Square 74. Local villagers reported seeing armed men moving through an abandoned Soviet-era outpost approximately 15 clicks northeast of here." I studied the map, recognizing the terrain. The outpost sat in a valley accessible only by a narrow pass, surrounded by caves and natural defensive positions. The Soviets had built it decades ago during their occupation, and it had changed hands multiple times since. "What's the mission, sir?" I asked. "Reconnaissance and clearing operation. Take your squad, assess the situation, and neutralize any threats. Intel suggests they're using the old trench system for storage or planning. We need to know what they're up to before they can launch any attacks on our supply routes." The commander's jaw tightened as he continued. "Be advised, satellite imagery shows fresh excavation around the trenches. They might be reinforcing positions or searching for something. Either way, we need eyes on target." I nodded, already running scenarios through my mind. "When do we roll out?" 0600 tomorrow. You'll have air support on standby, but weather's forecasted to deteriorate by midday. Make it quick and clean." Back at our quarters, I gathered my squad. They assembled quickly, sitting on cots and equipment crates, their attention focused. These men knew me well enough to read my expression before I spoke. "We've got a clearing operation tomorrow morning," I began, spreading the map on a makeshift table. "Soviet outpost, 15 clicks northeast. Intel says insurgents are using the trench system. We go in, clear it, gather intelligence, and extract." Mitchell leaned forward, studying the map. "That's rough terrain, Sarge. Limited egress routes." "I know. That's why we're going light and fast. Cooper, make sure comms are solid. Sullivan, you're on point. Torres, you stick with me. Everyone else, standard clearing procedures. Questions?" Specialist Luis Ramirez, our medic, raised his hand. "What about civilian presence?" "Nearest village is 3 clicks south. Should be clear, but stay alert. Rules of engagement remain standard. Positive ID before firing." The rest of the day passed in preparation. I checked and rechecked my gear: M4 carbine, sidearm, grenades, medical kit, water, ammunition. Each item had its place, and the ritual of preparation focused my mind. Around me, my squad did the same, the quiet professionalism of men who'd done this too many times to count. That evening, I sat outside under a sky turning purple and orange as the sun set behind the mountains. The temperature dropped quickly in the desert, and I pulled my jacket tighter. Private Sullivan approached, his young face uncertain. "Sergeant, can I ask you something?" "Shoot." He sat down on a sandbag barrier. "How do you deal with it? The not knowing what's coming?" I considered his question. "You don't really. You prepare as best you can, trust your training, and watch out for your brothers. Fear's natural, Sullivan. It keeps you sharp. Just don't let it paralyze you." He nodded slowly. "My mum sent me a letter yesterday. She asked when I'm coming home. What did you tell her?" That I've got work to finish here first. I clapped his shoulder. That's the right answer. We all go home together, or we don't go at all. Now get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. Sleep came in fits that night. I dreamed of trenches and shadows, of voices calling from underground. When my watch alarm buzzed at 0500, I was almost grateful to wake up. The pre-dawn darkness held a cold that cut through multiple layers. My squad assembled silently, faces smeared with camouflage paint, gear secured. We looked like ghosts in the dim light from the base perimeter. Mitchell performed final radio checks, while Cooper coordinated with air support. The distant thump of helicopter blades provided a reassuring backdrop as we moved to the motor pool. 3 armored vehicles waited, engines rumbling. Commander Peterson met us there. Reeves, latest intel update. Drone surveillance from 2 hours ago showed movement around the outpost. Could be guards or workers. Proceed with caution. Understood, sir. We loaded up and rolled out as the first hints of dawn painted the eastern sky. The vehicles bounced and lurched over the rough road, and I watched the landscape transform from darkness to grey to the harsh browns and tans of the Afghan desert. The mountains rose around us like ancient sentinels, their peaks still shrouded in morning mist. Sullivan rode in my vehicle, scanning the terrain through the window port. Torres handled navigation, while Mitchell maintained communications. The ride took 90 minutes, and tension built with each passing mile. Target area coming up, Torres announced. 2 clicks. I keyed the radio. All units prepare to dismount. Sullivan, Ramirez, take left flank. Mitchell, Cooper, you're with me. Torres, secure the vehicles. We stopped in a depression half a click from the outpost, using the terrain for concealment. The abandoned Soviet compound spread before us, crumbling concrete structures, rusted metal frameworks, and the zigzagging lines of trenches carved into the earth decades ago. Through my binoculars, I surveyed the area. No visible movement, but that meant nothing. The trenches were deep enough to hide an army. Sullivan, what do you see? He had his rifle scope trained on the compound. Movement, Sergeant. Northwest corner, near the main trench entrance. At least 2 individuals, possibly more inside. My heart rate increased, that familiar pre-combat focus sharpening my senses. Mitchell, call it in. Everyone else, weapons ready. We're going tactical. We moved in a standard formation, using available cover as we approached. The outpost grew larger, its abandoned buildings like broken teeth against the sky. The wind picked up, carrying dust that stung exposed skin and made visibility difficult. 50 meters from the trench entrance, we halted. The opening yawned before us, a dark mouth leading underground. Soviet engineers had built these trenches deep, with multiple levels and connecting tunnels designed to withstand bombardment. Cooper, try to raise anyone inside, standard warning. Cooper activated the loudspeaker system. His voice, amplified and distorted, echoed across the compound in Pashto, ordering anyone inside to surrender and exit with hands visible. Silence answered us. Your call, Sarge, Mitchell said quietly. I made the decision every squad leader dreads. We're going in. Sullivan, you and Ramirez cover our entry. Mitchell, Cooper, Torres, with me. Standard clearing procedure. Night vision activated despite the daylight. These trenches will be dark. We descended into the earth. The trench entrance was reinforced concrete, cracked and weathered but still solid. Steps led down into darkness that our night vision turned into eerie green landscapes. The air grew cooler and carried the smell of earth, old concrete, and something else. Something organic and wrong. Watch your corners, I whispered, my rifle leading the way. Behind me, Mitchell covered our 6 while Torres and Cooper checked side passages. The main trench stretched ahead, wide enough for 3 men to walk abreast. Wooden supports lined the walls, some rotted and sagging. We moved slowly, methodically, clearing each section before advancing. Contact left, Cooper hissed. I swung my rifle toward where he indicated. In the green glow of night vision, I saw supplies, crates, weapons, ammunition, but no people. Cache site, Mitchell confirmed. Recent too, these crates are new. We photographed everything, documenting the weapons and supplies for intelligence, but something felt off. The cache was significant, yet no guards protected it. Where was everyone? Keep moving, I ordered. The trench branched into multiple passages. We followed the main corridor, which sloped deeper underground. Temperature continued to drop, and our breath misted in the cold air despite the Afghan summer above. Then we heard it, a sound that made us freeze. Scratching, no, not scratching exactly, more like Digging, coming from deeper in the trench system. "What the hell is that?" Torres whispered. "Movement ahead," Mitchell warned, "multiple heat signatures." But when we advanced to the next junction, we found nothing. The digging sounds continued, echoing through the tunnels in a way that made it impossible to pinpoint the source. "This is wrong," Cooper muttered. "This whole thing feels wrong." I couldn't disagree, but we had a mission. "Stay focused. We clear the entire system, document everything, then extract." We pressed forward, descending another level. Here the trenches were older, the Soviet construction giving way to something more ancient. The walls showed different stonework, and the ceiling height changed. "Sarge," Torres called out, "you need to see this." He stood before a section of wall that had been partially excavated. Behind the concrete and earth, we could see older stone, carved stone, with markings that definitely weren't Soviet. "What is this place?" Cooper asked. Before I could answer, the digging sounds intensified. They came from directly ahead, where the main passage opened into what appeared to be a larger chamber. We approached cautiously, and what we saw in that chamber would haunt me for the rest of my life. The room was vast, far larger than any Soviet construction. Ancient stone columns supported a ceiling lost in darkness above, but it was what filled the chamber that stopped us cold. Bones, hundreds of them, perhaps thousands, stacked in piles, arranged in patterns, scattered across the floor. Human bones, bleached white with age, some so old they crumbled at the slightest disturbance. And in the center of it all, 5 men in civilian clothes worked with shovels and tools, excavating deeper into the chamber floor. They hadn't heard us approach, too focused on their work. "Freeze, drop your weapons," I shouted, my voice echoing through the chamber. The men spun around, faces pale with shock. 2 reached for rifles, but Mitchell and Cooper had them covered before they could raise their weapons. "Hands up now," Mitchell barked. They complied, slowly raising their hands, but their expressions weren't defiant or afraid. They looked relieved. One of them, an older man with a grey beard, spoke in heavily accented English. "Thank God. We thought we were alone down here. Who are you? What is this place?" I demanded, keeping my rifle trained on them while trying to process what I was seeing. "We are archaeologists," the older man said. "From the University of Kabul. We received permits to excavate this site 3 months ago." "Permits?" Torres said incredulously. "This is an active combat zone. We had permission from local authorities. This site is historically significant. We believe it dates back thousands of years, possibly to the time of Alexander the Great's campaigns through this region." I lowered my rifle slightly but stayed alert. "You're telling me you've been down here for 3 months? Living in these trenches?" No, we come and go. But last night, something happened. Our local guides fled, taking our transportation. We've been stranded here, trying to dig our way to a back exit we discovered on ancient maps." Mitchell stepped forward, examining the excavation area. "Why would your guides abandon you?" The archaeologist's face darkened. "They found something that terrified them. They kept saying this place was cursed, that we had awakened something that should remain buried." "What did you find?" I asked, though part of me didn't want to know. He led us to the excavation pit. At the bottom, partially uncovered, lay what appeared to be an entrance, a doorway carved from single massive stones, sealed with a heavy slab covered in ancient writing. "We believe this leads to burial chambers," he explained. "Royal tombs, perhaps, from a civilization that existed here before recorded history. But when we attempted to move the seal," he trailed off, his hands shaking. "What happened?" Cooper pressed. "Sounds. From behind the stone. Movement. And then the bones started falling, from above, from the walls, as if the earth itself was rejecting what we were doing. I looked at the piles of bones surrounding us, then up at the ceiling, disappearing into darkness. Geological instability, I told myself. Disturbing the excavation caused structural issues, dislodging bones that had been buried in the walls over centuries. "We need to extract everyone now," I decided. "Whatever's happening here, it's not safe. Mitchell, call for exfil. Cooper, help these men gather their essential equipment. We're leaving in 10 minutes. But as Cooper moved to help the archaeologists, a rumbling sound filled the chamber. Dust and small stones rained from above, and the ground beneath our feet trembled. "Cave in!" Mitchell shouted. "Move!" We ran for the passage we'd entered through, but behind us I heard a sound that didn't match geological activity. It was rhythmic, deliberate, like footsteps, dozens of them, coming from the depths of the excavation. "Don't look back, just run," I ordered, pushing Torres ahead of me. The archaeologists fled with us, their equipment abandoned in their panic. We raced through the trenches, the rumbling growing stronger. Behind us, sections of the passage collapsed, cutting off our route. "Alternative exit!" Mitchell called out, pointing to a side passage. We diverted, following his lead through narrower tunnels. The sounds pursued us, not just rumbling now, but something else. Whispers seemed to echo through the passages, though I knew it had to be wind through the complex tunnel system. Sullivan's voice crackled over the radio. "Sergeant, what's happening down there? We're reading seismic activity." "Possible structural collapse," I responded, trying to keep my voice steady. "Prepare for emergency extraction. We're coming out hot with additional personnel." We climbed, following the upward slope of the passages. Behind us, the sounds intensified, crashing, rumbling, and those impossible footsteps that my rational mind refused to accept. Then we hit a junction I didn't recognize. In our flight, we'd gotten turned around in the maze of trenches. "Which way?" Torres asked, panic edging into his voice. I forced myself to think, to remember the map. "Left. This should connect to the main Soviet level." We went left, and minutes later emerged into familiar territory, the Soviet trenches with their concrete reinforcement. Daylight filtered down from above, the most beautiful sight I'd ever seen. "Go, go, go," I urged, and we scrambled up the final slope to the surface. We burst out into brilliant sunlight, gulping fresh air. Sullivan and Ramirez rushed to help the archaeologists while Mitchell coordinated with our transport. Behind us, the trench entrance collapsed completely, sealing whatever lay beneath under tons of earth and stone. I stood there, chest heaving, watching dust billow from the collapsed entrance. My squad gathered around, everyone accounted for, everyone safe. The 5 archaeologists sat on the ground looking shell-shocked but alive. "What the hell was that?" Cooper asked, voicing what we were all thinking. "Structural failure," I said firmly. "The excavation destabilized the entire complex." We were lucky to get out, but even as I said it, I wasn't sure I believed my own explanation. The rhythmic sounds, the way the collapse seemed to follow us, the terror in the archaeologists' eyes, none of it fit the narrative of simple geological failure. The older archaeologist approached me. "Thank you, Sergeant. You saved our lives." "What was really down there?" I asked quietly, so only he could hear. "What did you find before we arrived?" He was silent for a long moment, staring at the collapsed trench entrance. "We found proof that civilizations existed here long before any history recorded. We found evidence of something, I don't know what to call it, a culture that buried their dead in ways we don't understand, with rituals that speak of fears we can't comprehend. And the sealed chamber? We never opened it. After the first disturbances, we decided some doors are meant to stay closed. But your military intelligence marked this as an insurgent site. Why? I'd been wondering the same thing. The weapons cache we found, someone was using these trenches recently. Then perhaps we weren't the first to disturb what lies beneath. Perhaps others came before us, seeking to use this place, and fled for the same reasons our guides did. Commander Peterson arrived via helicopter within the hour. We gave our reports, submitted our photographic evidence of the weapons cache, and arranged transport for the archaeologists back to Kabul under military escort. The commander pulled me aside as preparations for departure continued. "Your report mentions a partial collapse. Any casualties?" "No, sir. We extracted everyone safely." "And the archaeological team's story about ancient tombs?" I hesitated. "Sir, whatever they were excavating destabilized the entire trench system. I recommend the site be marked as hazardous and restricted." He studied my face. "But you cleared the insurgent activity?" "The cache was there, but no active personnel. Whoever was using the site appears to have abandoned it. Given the structural instability, I don't believe they'll return." Peterson nodded slowly. "Good work, Sergeant. Get your men back to base. I'll handle the paperwork." The flight back to Afab Sentinel took less time than the drive out had. I sat in the helicopter, watching the mountains pass below, thinking about what we'd found in those trenches. My rational mind insisted on logical explanations. The sounds were geological activity. The footsteps were collapsing supports. The atmosphere of dread was just the natural human response to being underground in an unstable structure during combat operations. But battle-hardened men don't scare easily. We'd been through firefights, ambushes, and situations that would break most people. Yet something in those trenches had affected all of us in a way that combat never had. That night, back in our quarters, my squad was unusually quiet. We'd been through the debriefing, submitted our reports, cleaned our weapons, and completed all the post-mission routines. But the usual jokes and banter were absent. Sullivan broke the silence. "Sarge, have you ever felt like that before? Like we weren't alone down there?" Before I could answer, Mitchell spoke up. "I did 2 tours in Iraq, cleared dozens of structures and tunnels. Never felt anything like what I felt in that chamber. It was just geological instability," I said, but my voice lacked conviction. Torres shook his head. "I grew up Catholic, Sergeant. My grandmother used to tell stories about places where the dead don't rest. She'd say some ground is cursed, that bad things leave marks that don't wash away with time. We're soldiers, not superstitious villagers," I said firmly. "We encountered an unstable structure, extracted civilians, and completed our mission. That's all that happened." But Ramirez, who'd been silent until then, spoke quietly. "Then why did Command restrict the area? Why did they mark those coordinates as off-limits with a 5-click exclusion zone?" I had no answer for that. The orders had come through an hour after our debriefing. The entire area around the Soviet outpost was now restricted territory. No approach without direct authorization from Command. The following days passed in routine patrols and operations. Life at FOB Sentinel continued its usual rhythm, but I noticed changes in my squad. Sullivan requested a transfer to a different unit. Mitchell became more withdrawn, spending his free time reading instead of his usual socializing. Cooper jumped at sudden noises. 2 weeks after our mission to the trenches, I received a visitor. The older archaeologist, Professor Ahmad Khalil, had returned to the base with Commander Peterson's authorization. We met in a private office. The professor looked like he'd aged years in the short time since I'd last seen him. "Sergeant Reeves, I needed to speak with you, to tell you what I've learned since we left that place. Professor, I'm not sure there's anything more to discuss. The site is sealed and restricted. Please hear me out." His hands trembled as he opened a leather satchel and removed several documents. I researched the location, consulted with historians and archaeologists throughout the region. That site has a history that predates Soviet occupation by millennia. He spread old maps and papers across the table. Local legends speak of it as a place where an ancient king buried his enemies alive, thousands of them, during a siege. The stories say their spirits never found peace because they weren't given proper burial rites. For centuries, people avoided that valley. With respect, Professor, legends aren't facts. No, but patterns are. I documented every expedition to that site over the past century. In 1924, a British archaeological team disappeared there. In 1958, Soviet engineers attempting to build the outpost reported strange occurrences and deaths from unexplained accidents. In 1979, Mujahideen fighters used the trenches briefly, then abandoned them, claiming the place was haunted. He pulled out a final document, a military report from 2003, and 12 years ago, a US Special Forces unit conducted operations in those same trenches. According to the report, they encountered unexplained phenomena and recommended the site be avoided for future operations. I felt cold, despite the warm office. Why wasn't this in our intelligence briefing? Because officially these are all coincidences, superstition and unreliable reports. But I believe something about that place affects people. Whether it's geological, gases released from deep underground, subsonic frequencies that induce fear, or something else, I don't know. But men like you, trained soldiers, don't abandon positions without reason. He looked at me intently. "What did you really experience down there, Sergeant?" I thought about lying, about maintaining the official story. But this man had nearly died because of what we'd found. He deserved the truth. I heard things that didn't make sense. Saw shadows where there should have been none. Felt a presence that my training says couldn't exist. And every instinct I've developed through years of combat told me to run, that staying in those trenches meant something worse than death. Professor Khalil nodded slowly. "Thank you for your honesty. I don't know what lies beneath that place. Perhaps it's an ancient burial ground that releases toxic gases when disturbed. Perhaps the psychology of being deep underground in a place associated with death and violence creates mass hysteria. Or perhaps..." He trailed off. "Perhaps what?" I prompted. "Perhaps some places accumulate so much death, so much suffering, that they become fundamentally wrong. Not supernaturally, but in ways we don't yet understand. Places where the boundary between past and present thins, where history echoes so strongly that we can feel it." He gathered his documents. "I'm returning to Kabul tomorrow. I wanted you to know that I'm advocating for the site to be permanently sealed and marked as a cultural heritage location off-limits to any excavation. Your military's restriction zone will help ensure no one else disturbs what's there." After he left, I sat alone in the office for a long time. The sun set outside, painting the mountains in shades of red and gold. In a few hours, I'd rejoin my squad, continue our mission, and keep serving until our tour ended and we could go home. But something had changed in those trenches. We'd all felt it, even if we couldn't name it or explain it. We'd gone in expecting insurgents and found something that shook us in ways combat never had. That night, I wrote a long letter to my wife back in Pennsylvania. I told her about the mission, leaving out the parts that would worry her, but including enough truth that I felt honest. I told her I was looking forward to coming home, to leaving this place and its ancient mysteries behind. But I also made a private note in my journal, something I'd keep until I could make sense of it. Today, I learned that some battles aren't against enemies you can see or threats you can fight. Some battles are against the weight of history, against places that humanity should leave undisturbed. We thought we were clearing a trench system. Instead, we found something that reminded us how small we are, how little we understand about the world, and how some doors should remain closed. 3 months later, my squad and I rotated home. We'd completed our tour, survived combat, and fulfilled our duty. But on quiet nights when I can't sleep, I sometimes think about those trenches and what lies buried beneath the Afghan mountains. Sullivan left the military after his contract ended. Mitchell took up meditation and started studying ancient history. Cooper still jumps at unexpected sounds. Torres went back to his grandmother in Arizona and started attending church regularly. Ramirez became an EMT, focusing on helping the living rather than contemplating the dead. And me. I stayed in the army, continued leading men, and never spoke publicly about what we experienced in those trenches. But I learned something important that day. Courage isn't about being unafraid. It's about acknowledging fear, respecting it, and still doing what needs to be done. We went into those trenches as soldiers following orders. We came out as men who understood that the world holds mysteries we're not meant to solve, doors we're not meant to open, and places where the past refuses to stay buried. The official report lists the mission as a successful clearing operation with no casualties. The truth is more complicated. We all came back alive, but we left something of ourselves in those dark passages. A piece of the certainty we'd carried, the belief that everything could be explained or fought or overcome with enough training and firepower. Some battlefields are physical. Others exist in the space between what we know and what we fear, between the rational world we want to believe in and the deeper truths that hide in dark places where ancient bones rest uneasily. I don't know what we really found in those trenches. I'm not sure I want to know. But I know this. There are places in this world where history accumulates like sediment, layer upon layer of human suffering and mystery. Places where the dead outnumber the living by such margins that the boundary between past and present becomes uncertain. And sometimes, when you're a soldier doing your duty in a land where empires have risen and fallen for thousands of years, you stumble into those places. You clear what you thought was an insurgent position and instead find evidence that some mysteries are meant to remain buried. We thought the trench was clear. We were wrong, not because of hidden enemies or booby traps, but because we found something that shook battle-hardened men in ways combat never could. A reminder that the world is older and stranger than we acknowledge, and that some places hold shadows too deep for any light to penetrate. The restricted zone remains in place. The trenches stay sealed beneath tons of collapsed earth and stone, and 5 archaeologists plus 8 soldiers carry memories of a day when we descended into darkness, seeking one kind of threat, and encountered something entirely different. That's the truth of what happened in those trenches. Make of it what you will.